Roger talked about the challenge of gay love, and I really like that, Roger, that you focused on that. You tried to be real present with your own process about that. And a lot of what I'm going to read tonight is about not just the challenge of gay love, but also what happens when that challenge is actually met and something really redemptive and homosexual and soulful and wonderful happens. But before I do that, I'm going to actually read from Mitch's analysis. Last week, he read, last month, it's my Toxic Shame and Dissociation. Last month, he read from the story of Gilgamesh, and then he began to read the analysis of the story, and I'm going to summarize that briefly in a moment. And then I'm going to continue reading the analysis. It's about 40 pages, and I'll read it and try and be myself and real and process my feelings and maybe give some commentary while reading those 40 pages of the analysis of the story of Gilgamesh. And then hopefully there'll be some time and, of course, some questions and some answers. Before I do that, I thought I should talk about how I'm feeling right now, which is, at least right now, in terms of how I'm feeling, is like I joke with Roger, is terrifying. I am feeling anxious, very scared. There's like a place inside of me that, even though I'm talking about the words, is actually receding, and I can almost feel the tendency to want to dissociate. I'm revisiting certain kinds of memories about being the bar mitzvah boy or the apple of my parents' eyes and having to perform for them, like the little Jewish kids in the ghetto with the tambourines for pennies. And it feels really, really awful, actually, inside. It's so awful, I'm not even so sure I can tolerate it. So what's that about? Why am I feeling so awful? I mean, I know all of you guys and women. I actually have relationships with you, many of you, most of you, some long-standing ones. Part of me feels actually kind of excited and encouraged, and you're here, and there's something that I have to share with you that Mitch wrote that's really, really, really amazing. What Mitch has been able to do in the most economical of ways, in the most simple of ways of writing about something, to take something really complicated and very old and put it down in words that speak to us as gay and lesbian people today is so amazing that he does it in a gay-affirmative and gay-centered way. It's so inspiring that I'm also excited to share the paper with you. It's really, really, really wonderful. But there's another part of me that's also, like Roger said, in terms of the challenge of gay love. You know, I want to try and be present with this as much as possible. That feels this anxiety, this dread. You know, if I really get underneath it, it's more like rage. And if I was talking to Chris earlier today in the afternoon, just a little bit, and I spoke with Roger yesterday, and I even talked to Kellum and Steve earlier today a little bit. I spoke with Alex about it last night, my friend Alex. If I really think about what that anxiety is about, if I'm really present with it, it's not about anything that's happening right now. I grew up like a gay kid in a really dysfunctional family with hardcore Jewish people, right? I mean, hardcore Jewish people. I had relatives that came over on the boat. They didn't speak English. They were extremely Orthodox Jewish people. My parents hated their guts because they were so out of it, but were completely obligated to worship at their embassies and by keeping kosher and doing all kinds of things they hated and resented and had no idea why they were doing it. I was in therapy recently, and she was helping me. My therapist was helping me. Why is it that I have so much trouble making contact? Why am I so anxious that it's hard for me to actually make contact with the soul figure that Roger was talking about, with the words when I'm writing, with people? What is that? And I had some intellectual idea. She Doug, there's really something that happened. Look at it. She's really tough. She goes, nuh-uh. There's something that happened. And I spouted the usual things that I'm spouting to you right now. But she said, try and feel it in your body. And some really disgusting image came to mind. My Jewish mother, I love my Jewish mother, right? She's actually all of the time picking her nose. And she does it unconsciously. She's not aware of it, and then she eats it. It's really disgusting. She's not aware of it. But I can just stop doing that! It's disgusting! It's really hard to get angry at her because she's so controlling. Fuck you! And my father, you can never scream at him because if you screamed at him, he wouldn't hit you, but he would threaten to hit you. He was a raging alcoholic. So I have some toxic shame that's coming up, like I should read Mitch's paper. What are you doing? You're being narcissistic and indulging your kids. And fuck you! I have to try and struggle about what my process is. Probably because that's really what Mitch is talking about, each of us trying to do in terms of getting connected to our homosexual soulfulness, is facing the block about the block. I can feel it right now. They come back. Fuck you! Go away! So I'm going to try my best to struggle as I read the paper with that imagery. And as I do it, I can feel a little bit of a sense of what I project onto Chris and Roger and everyone in here, to a certain extent, is actually a feeling of okayness as a homosexual. And how to actually try to feel into that as I struggle with my toxic rage and shame, that actually there's also something guiding me, and has always guided me to be a gay-identified person. That is the experience of gay love, even though I can only feel it sometimes just a little bit. So I'm going to try and struggle with those experiences, and I encourage you to struggle with your own analogous versions of that as I read the material and go over it. And hopefully we can stay embodied and connected to what's going on. And if you notice that it's hard for you, I encourage you to try to be present with that too. And I'm going to do my best to be present with my own version of that. And I'm going to get into the material, and I'm going to really struggle with my tendency to get hide my violence through being super intellectual. And I hope I can do my best around that. Try and stay more grounded in my feeling. So I'm going to summarize a little bit what Mitch did last time, even though I have some kids that are wiping my memory every moment and I don't remember anything. So I think it has to do with not looking at my mother. I mean, I think that story about the nose picking is just a metaphor. I think a general experience of not being able to actually look at them and relate to them because they were so violent. They didn't take care of me, like Roger was saying. We need an institute to help us struggle with the moment-by-moment violence that comes in around how hard it is to stay connected. It's a constant struggle for me. So the last month, Mitch read two pieces. He read a story called The Story of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. And for those of you who were here, and for those of you who weren't here, it was about 50 pages or so, and it's a story about the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh is apparently the first recorded piece of writing in the history of civilization. It's also, apparently, a story of romance. It's also apparently, as Mitch talked to us about it last month, a story about homosexual romance. Isn't that trippy? The very first piece of recorded writing in the history of human civilization is a romance, and is a story about gay love. It's so fucking amazing that that's part of our consciousness as human beings. And I know I wasn't taught that as a kid, and I don't think I was even taught that in college. It's a really important piece of understanding. And he read from that story, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with the basic storyline. I I over-studied, and of course I don't remember anything beforehand. But it's written 3000 BC, and it's the story of a king whose name is Gilgamesh. And apparently the king is this real fucker. He is very inflated, and he thinks he could do anything, and he's real bad news. And the gods send a person from heaven to come and help him realize his true self. And the name of that person who comes from the star in heaven is Enkidu. And at first they fight, but in the fight they connect. Something amazing happens in the connection, which is they fall profoundly in love. That's what happens. And the way Mitch read it is so cool, and the way he read it, it almost as if we were in ancient Uruk, with the drums and the bells, and how people would tell these stories. He evoked it really well. It was an oral tradition. It wasn't written down, and people would pass this tradition down orally, and it would happen. The story would be told for hours in and hours out. It was really, really cool how he evoked that. And then he basically went through the whole story pretty economically. There's all of the gods are initiating Gilgamesh and Enkidu. They have a sacred marriage. They treat each other as if they were like husband and wife. They embrace all of the time. Gilgamesh finds his other half. Mitch's whole concept of the archetype of the double, which is that there is a soul equivalent to what Jung calls the anima and the animus in homosexual form. Mitch is the first person in 1976 to call that the double. The story of Gilgamesh and Enkidu is an obviously really rich example of how this double manifests. So the story happens between them. They become great buddies. They fight great demons. They love each other. They sleep together. They talk all of the time. The great fantasy all of us want of unrequited gay love. They fight with the demon Humbaba, which is important, and some of this storyline will be reprised when I read to you Mitch's analysis. They fight the mighty bull of heaven, which is a big deal and gets them in a shitload of trouble. And then, because for some reasons which we'll learn about when I read the paper to you, the gods decide that the two men, in order to understand more deeply the feeling of romance that they're experiencing between the two of them, one of them must die, and that's Enkidu. I think in my dissociation I didn't kind of let you know that Enkidu is different from Gilgamesh. He's a creature from nature. He's kind of like a sensate person, maybe kind of what I like in a way. I guess we all like a sensate hot guy or a sensate hot girl. So yummy, yummy, and he's really yummy, and they get him all into being a human being eventually, but he's this sort of animal-like creature. He's really, really hot, and they do a lot of great stuff together. The gods have another plan ahead. One could say that they got inflated in some ways. And the issue of inflation and deflation, when I read this paper to you that Mitch wrote, is very, very important. So keep that in mind. They got inflated, as we all do, especially when we fall in love. We get inflated. And the gods decide that Enkidu has to die, and they have a couple of dreams. Enkidu wakes up in the middle of the night with these really intense dreams, and oh my God, I dreamed that the gods were in council and they were deciding my fate. And Gilgamesh, like gay lovers would do, helps him analyze the dream, and they both realize that Enkidu was going to die, and he dies. And of course, you can imagine what that's like, and the paper gets into it. Gilgamesh is bereft. He's highly, highly, highly bereft. He goes on a journey to find his soul. He goes into the underworld and meets a lot of different people, some of whom we'll hear about again when I read this paper. They basically are figures from the unconscious who are great teachers and guides, and they eventually teach him how to deal with the mystery of the opposites, of the inflation, of deflation, of life and death. They initiate him into death. And in so doing, as he goes down and he finds all kinds of different things, he develops a relationship, and there's two different versions of the story that Mitch has collated. He finds a relationship to himself that is actually Enkidu within. He finds Enkidu as also a great teacher and a guide, and they have a new kind of relationship where Gilgamesh has introverted and owned his inner beloved, and